Larry sat down to study. Just 5 minutes, he told himself. 5 minutes of focused, undistracted, actual studying. He had a textbook open, a highlighter in hand, and the full intention of becoming a slightly more competent human being. Then his phone buzzed. Not even an important buzz, just a notification that someone he vaguely knew from high school had posted a photo of soup. And somehow, 40 minutes later, Larry was 3 videos deep into a documentary about competitive cheese rolling, and the textbook was still open to the exact same page. Larry is not stupid. Larry is not lazy in the way people usually mean it. Larry just has a brain that is apparently at war with him. And today we're going to figure out why 5 minutes feels impossible and why Larry, despite wanting to study, keeps ending up somewhere else entirely. Let's start with what actually happened in Larry's head the moment his phone buzzed. It wasn't really about the soup photo. It was about a tiny chemical called dopamine, and dopamine gets a bad reputation because people think it's the feel-good chemical. It's not really. Dopamine is the I want chemical. It's the anticipation, not the reward. It's the itch, not the scratch. So when Larry's phone buzzed, his brain didn't light up because something good was about to happen. It lit up because something might be interesting, and that maybe was enough to hijack his entire nervous system away from a textbook and toward a phone screen. Here's the part that should genuinely bother Larry, and probably you too. Scientists once ran an experiment with rats and a lever. Every time a rat pressed the lever, its brain got a small jolt of dopamine. The rats pressed that lever over and over, forgetting to eat, forgetting to sleep, some pressing it until they physically collapsed. Larry's phone is that lever. The textbook is the food bowl sitting untouched in the corner of the cage. Larry knows the textbook is what he actually needs. His brain, unfortunately, does not care about needs. It cares about the lever. So why does the lever feel so much stronger than the textbook? This is where it gets interesting and slightly depressing. Larry's brain has a rule, and the rule is called homeostasis, which is a fancy way of saying the brain always tries to find balance. If Larry floods his brain with quick hits of stimulation constantly, scrolling, notifications, 40-second videos, his brain adjusts. It turns down its own sensitivity to dopamine so that normal, everyday things stop registering as interesting at all. This is called dopamine tolerance, and it explains something Larry has felt his entire life without being able to name it. The textbook isn't just boring to Larry, it's boring compared to everything else his brain has gotten used to. It's not that Larry can't focus, it's that his brain has been recalibrated to expect fireworks, and a textbook is, at best, a sad, damp sparkler. Larry tried to explain this to himself the next day. Okay, he thought, if my brain is broken because of all the stimulation, I'll just remove the stimulation. Larry deleted every app from his phone, all of them, even the weather app, for reasons Larry still cannot fully justify. He put his phone in a drawer in another room behind a stack of towels, as if his phone might somehow escape and find him. And for the first hour, Larry was, by his own account, miserable. He didn't know what to do with his hands. He picked up a pen and put it down 4 times. He stared at a wall with the same intensity most people reserve for actual emergencies. But somewhere around hour 2, something shifted. Larry noticed the textbook sitting there, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, it didn't look quite so unbearable. This is the actual mechanism behind what people call a dopamine detox, and it's worth understanding properly because most people get it wrong. The point was never that dopamine is bad. Larry needs dopamine. Everyone does. It's the reason anyone does anything at all. The point of removing the constant stimulation wasn't to punish Larry. It was to lower the bar his brain had quietly raised so that something like reading a textbook could feel rewarding again instead of feeling like punishment by comparison. Now Larry, being Larry, could not maintain no phone in another room behind a stack of towels forever. That's not sustainable, and frankly, it's a little unhinged as a long-term life strategy. So Larry needed something else, something he could actually keep doing. And this is where the real trick comes in, the one that separates people who occasionally study for 5 minutes from people who can actually sit still and do the thing. Larry built a rule for himself: work first, reward after. This sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but Larry had been doing the exact opposite his entire life without realizing it. He'd tell himself, "I'll just watch one video to relax and then I'll study." But the video was the lever. Once Larry pulled it, his brain got its hit, and the textbook afterward felt even more unbearable than before, because now it was being compared directly against the thing that just made his brain light up. The order matters enormously. Reward before work kills the work. Reward after work reinforces it. So Larry flipped it. Study for 25 minutes, then 15 minutes of whatever he wanted, guilt-free. No negotiating, no just 5 more minutes on either side. And here's the detail that made this actually stick for Larry. Instead of becoming just another failed system, he made the first step embarrassingly easy: not study for an hour, not even study for 25 minutes. The actual rule was, open the textbook. That's it. That was the entire task. Because Larry's brain doesn't panic about opening a book. It panics about the imagined hour of suffering that follows. Once the book was open, more often than not, Larry just kept going because starting turned out to be the only hard part. There's a version of this idea that shows up in old philosophy under a term that sounds pretentious but isn't. The brain treats big, vague tasks like threats and small, specific ones like nothing at all. Study for the exam is a threat. It's vague, it's enormous, and Larry's brain reacts to it the same way it might react to a wolf. Open the book to page 42 is not a threat. It's just a small, boring instruction, and boring instructions don't trigger the same resistance that big, scary ones do. Larry also discovered something by accident that turned out to matter more than he expected. He started studying in a coffee shop instead of his silent bedroom, and he actually focused better with background noise than with total silence. This seemed backwards until Larry looked into it. Total silence, it turns out, isn't the neutral, ideal condition people assume it is. For a lot of people, especially people who are used to constant background stimulation, silence itself becomes a kind of void that the brain tries to fill, usually by wandering. A little bit of ambient chaos, oddly, gives the brain something to actively tune out, which is its own small workout in focus. Larry didn't need silence. Larry needed something boring enough to ignore. By the end of 2 weeks, Larry hadn't transformed into some unrecognizable productivity monster. He still checked his phone too much. He still occasionally ended up watching something about competitive cheese rolling at 11 at night for reasons that made sense to nobody, including Larry. But the 5-minute task that used to turn into 40 minutes of nothing now actually looked like 5 minutes, sometimes stretching into 25 without Larry noticing, because starting had stopped being the impossible part. Larry's brain was never broken. It was just doing exactly what brains are built to do, chasing the biggest, easiest reward available at any given moment. The textbook never stood a chance against a phone that had been trained to deliver constant tiny jolts of maybe. But once Larry lowered the bar his brain had quietly raised, and once he stopped rewarding himself before doing the work, the textbook stopped needing to compete with fireworks. It just needed to be the next small, boring, doable thing. So if you've ever sat down with the best intentions and ended up somewhere completely different an hour later, you're not broken either. You're just running the same system Larry is. The only real question is which lever you keep pulling and whether you're willing to put it in another room behind a stack of towels just to find out what happens next.